Hey, what's going on? I'm Matt O'Leary back with another video, and today I'll be talking about how the New York Jets can draw some success from what a couple other New York franchises have done. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention you can follow me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever it is you get your podcast. And last but not least, Thursday, check out the live stream with myself, Green Bean, and Ryan on Jets Talk 24/7's YouTube channel. We'll be live streaming the NFL Draft on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. You're not going to want to miss it, so tune in. Okay, so I think I have a pretty good comparison for what the Jets could be, and one has been brought up a lot, the other not so much, but I want the New York Jets to become two franchises in New York that, let's face it, had some dysfunction for a while and have seemed to turn a corner. We're going to first talk about the team that I care about, and then the second team, I'm not a fan of the sport, just going to be honest. So I don't really have a rooting interest on this team, but I am appreciative as a sports fan and as a New Yorker of what this franchise has done. So what I want to talk about is how the Jets have this transfer of power, right? Joe Douglas has come in. This is going into his third year, so relatively new GM. This is only his second draft, so it's a relatively new GM and a new coach that has a lot of upside, brought in some really key personnel pieces on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And comparatively, this reminds me of two situations. And the first one we'll talk about is the New York Islanders. Yes, that's my team, the New York Islanders. Been a fan of them for a while now, and they were a dysfunctional team. Now, I know, if you're not really an Islanders fan, let me explain. So one of the better franchises in their first 25 years of existence. Let's say they won 4 Stanley Cups in a row from 1980 through 1983, and were a really competitive team in the late 70s. And then the 90s roll around, and after 1993, they were awful for a very long time. So after 1993, they didn't win a playoff series again until 2016. They went 23 years without a playoff series. And they made the playoffs a couple of times, but it wasn't anything of no. They got bounced in the first round. They got swept a couple of times. There were some heartbreakers along the way for sure, but at the end of the day, they weren't good. And the reason for that was they had Mike Milbury and Garth Snow in power. So Mike Milbury, they brought in for 11 years. He was the head coach in the mid 90s, and then a power struggle happens. Wink, wink. What happened with Adam Gase? He gets the GM gig and he runs the show for 11 years. Was awful. Like, legitimately, you could make the case that he is the worst general manager in the history of the league. Bad. Like, so many awful decisions. Traded away key draft picks. Traded draft picks for players that never panned out. All kinds of crazy stuff. Then they transition from him in 2006. He steps down. And you want to talk about dysfunction. And if you know the story, if you're an Islanders fan or a hockey fan, you know the story, but I'm telling this to the people who don't know, because I'm sure there are people who don't follow the sport. They went from Mike Milbury to Garth Snow, who was their backup goalie. He retired and became the general manager. It would essentially be like if the Jets made Josh McCown the general manager after the 2018 season. Like, that's the kind of thing that this team did. They were awful. And that he ran the show for 12 years. So you had literally a 23-year run of a backup goalie trying to be a general manager and a disgruntled, crazy coach running the show in a power. It was awful. And mix in like all kinds of arena drama and stuff like that. Really, really bad. But then new ownership comes in and they decide to make some changes. They bring in Lou Lamoriello, who has won a ton of Stanley Cups with the New Jersey Devils and had some success in Toronto as an executive. And they hire Barry Trotz, who is fresh off of a Stanley Cup victory in 2018 with the Washington Capitals. And he is someone, before that cup with the Capitals, he had that team, extremely competitive. They were like the best team in the league a couple of times. And before that, he was the coach of Nashville, who's an expansion team, and he had them competitive for a really long time. So this is like a really good coach. So they bring in a good general manager and a good coach. In their first year, they lose their best player in free agency. John Tavares leaves in free agency, and still they overachieve. They make it to the second round of the playoffs. This was a team that was supposed to be in the running for a first overall pick, end up making the playoffs and winning a round. Then in year 2, they're a pretty good team. They make a deadline move and bringing in JG Pajot, and they end up getting to the Eastern Conference Final. And now going into year 3, they are going to be a playoff team again in year 3 and have built this consistency all because of who was in charge. They went from dysfunctional people in charge to, hey, this is a guy in Lou Lamoriello who has had success and a coach with a lot of promise. What does that remind you of? Now, let's look at the New York Knicks. Again, a team, I'm not a fan of the Knicks. I don't hate the Knicks. I'm just not a basketball fan. I'm not a Knicks or a Nets fan, but look at what they've done. I mean, let's just go back to 2000. They made it out of the first round of the playoffs once in this millennium. One time. That's it. It's been that bad. 2012, 2013 has been their only good year outside of this year in 21 years. They've had disasters with Dolan, on and off the court stuff. Derek Fisher was their head coach. Jeff Hornacek was their coach. Kurt Rambis, David Fizdale. They've gone through this laundry list of just bad coaches. And then they hire Leon Rose. And then they go out and hire Tom Thibodeau, who's a well-respected coach around the league. And what do you know? The culture begins to change. Tom Thibodeau is here now, and they are sitting in, fourth place in the Eastern Conference? Last year, they were 12th in the Eastern Conference, and now they are up to 4th? That's a huge step in the right direction. They are overachieving. And now you have guys like Zion Williamson, one of the best rookies in the game, is talking with a big smile on his face, playing in the Garden. Nobody wanted to come to the Garden to play for the Knicks. Nobody, because the culture was that bad, but it's beginning to change. And this could be that for the New York Jets. This time, you're going to have a new head coach that is well respected around the league. Joe Douglas is very well respected around the league. Sure, he hasn't been perfect. I'll be the first to admit he hasn't been perfect. But now, if he hits on this quarterback, that is huge. If you hit on this Zach Wilson pick, that changes everything. 21 draft picks in the next 2 years. This team can be, I'm not going to go out and say that I think this is going to be a playoff team in 2021. That's just nuts. That expectation is just way too high. But if they go from a 2-win team to a competitive 7-win team, and then they take that step after and are a playoff team in 2021, and you could build on the draft and have this core and nucleus and an actual good culture, then the New York Jets can be New York's next Islanders and Knicks. Both of those teams are on a turnaround. Both of those teams are competitive, and both of those teams have a bright future. The New York Jets, yes, those New York Jets who haven't made the playoffs in the last decade can do exactly what those guys did if they bring in the right head coach and general manager, which I believe in Joe Douglas, and I think Robert Saleh has the credentials to be a very good coach in this league. Positions of power matters. The Jets have gotten that wrong for a decade. That's why they haven't been a playoff team in a decade. And if you hit on draft picks, and if you have a good GM and a good coach, chances are you're going to be competitive year in and year out. Let me know if you agree down in the comments below. Do you think, and I laid it out again, I understand not everyone's a hockey fan, and maybe you don't like that comparison, but most people are NBA fans. I'm not, but I wanted to give you both. Let me know. Do you agree with the comparison? Do you buy into that? Let me know. I am Matt O'Leary. Make sure to subscribe if you're new, and I will talk to you next time.